Today's episode will be a conversation with Steve Hewitt. And Steve's got a fantastic voice, great songwriter. But my interest in this, and if you listen to how he explains things, is the sort of very sort of, in NLP terms, a sort of kinesthetic, tactile way that he approaches music, which I think is fascinating. And anyway, without further ado, so on today's episode, I'm going to be talking to Steve Hewitt. Steve, good to see you.
Hi, mate. Good to see you too. Thanks for having me. It's lovely.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Right, traditional first question, which is, what do you do?
I'm starting. Well, I do many things. You know, I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I'm trying to be a full-time musician, which is proven to be pretty difficult. Which, you know, I have bursts of gigs, and then I build up that consistency, and then you kind of get used to gigging all the time, and then you become more creative because you're writing on the road, or even if you're gigging every night and coming home, you still got that. I don't know. It's, you know, momentum, but then it goes quiet for a little while, and you kind of retreat back a bit. So yeah, I'm trying to get used to the dynamic, you know, because it's up there and it's like brilliant. I could do this all the time. Just, you know, money's looking nice and that kind of thing. But then afterwards it goes down. It's like, right, I've got to try and find a few pennies somewhere else because needs must. You know, I've got responsibilities. But so yeah, at the moment I'm trying to be, you know, a working singer-songwriter, trying to gig as much as I can, and I'm doing a bit of delivery and just anything that I can, which so that I can, you know, keep the bills paid and keep doing what I love to do. But it's always kind of look at what I do as a kind of a blessing and a curse, really.
Yes.
You need, yeah, you need.
I know that one.
To do so much of what you don't want to do just to enjoy that little glimmer,
Yes.
and then you grab that and that. People don't know that little bit what you've worked towards, that will keep you going for a few months in advance. But that depletes, and it's like, what? I can't forget the reason why I'm doing this. You know, I've just got to keep my head down, and yeah, I can't take the bad times as I've made a bad decision in doing this. I've just got to think this is the makings of something that's going to be a success in my mind. Hopefully,
I think this is. We've sort of hit a patch of time, which obviously we didn't sort of expect, obviously. But I often think about the old sort of bluesmen, you know, as they're paying the dues.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And I think about that and think, well, you know, they had a rough time, and yet they managed to do that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you're saying that, you know, you're doing these other things, because I think there's a lot of musicians who've had to do this.
Yeah.
Because of the way that things panned out. Well, obviously we're going to come across all of that stuff as we talk, I'm sure. Let's just take it back to your sort of early sort of interest in things, you know, as a kid. What sort of fired you up generally?
Two words really, Buddy Holly. As soon as I heard Buddy Holly, I just love that clean. I mean, like, rock and roll in itself, there was a lot of replicas, other people trying to do that, and the Elvis thing. But with Buddy Holly, I could hear, I could hear that he was trying to be himself and do his own thing, and it was always about the hook line with him. It's always about that, what grabbed you, and it's like, I love it already, but I can't wait to the chorus. And then that really kind of gave me a premise for what songwriting was really. But then, you know, after that, I was working at a place with my dad. My dad's a builder. He was working at a place in Essex called Latchendon, and he got this contract to build gymnasiums and rotivate lawns and build extensions and kitchens and stuff. So we was on this one property for about 11 months. And during that time, there was one day I was out rotivating a lot. I can't think what I was doing. But it was a beautiful sunny day. The kitchen window was open, and I heard David Gray's Babylon for the first time. I couldn't quite work out what he was singing, because it was Goya Ha, Goya Here, Feel It Now, Babylon. And I was like, what does that even mean? But I kind of tried to link Babylon to London, and I think the song's about London. Even now, I'm still. And then after that, it kind of, I forgot about the rock and roll era. I put the electric down, and then I just got obsessed with lyrical side and making melodies, which led me on to Bob Dylan. And the fact that, yeah, it's weird because, a lot of people say I've got a good voice, but I haven't been inspired by people that have necessarily got a great voice, but it's always about that melody. And I think the injustice of it always is it don't matter how good you can play or sing, if that melody's not there, it's all about that melody, what runs through. It's all about that, and whether you sing that or play that. So yeah, sorry,
No, this is good.
I'll tend.
This is good.
To digress a lot. So
no, that's
Steve,
great.
Stop, go back.
No, let's just we'll talk about that a little bit, because I think it's a really important point. I've often sort of, one of the little things that keeps coming up in this podcast is about, fundamentally, what is music? What is its impact? And the fact that we've sort of now got to this point where there's not an awful lot of things being said musically. You look at the people in the past, they had something to say. They had, they were talking from their own experience about their life or whatever. And now we've got this sort of thing, which is a bit weird. We've got these singers that can do sort of weird stuff, and we've got musicians who can do extraordinary things for TikTok type of thing.
Yeah, it's true.
But it's like, well, what's any musician, what are they saying? And I'm thinking back, to the days of the buying an LP, buying an album.
Yeah.
And what sort of motivated you to buy that album, take it home, and literally digest the album.
Yeah.
It was an experience.
Oh, exactly.
It was an artistic experience in itself. And I can't see where we're going with all of this stuff now.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I mean, it's nice to hear the music. See, the thing with playing a record, you make a cup of tea, you take it out. It's a physical thing, so it's an experience throughout. It's an experience buying it, thinking about listening about it, preparing yourself, opening it, putting the needle, hearing that little pop and scratch, and then just knowing that you can't rush through it, knowing that you can't skip track. You've literally just got to enjoy it or endure it, and that's the way it is. But it was an experience.
Mm.
It amazes me that we're part of an industry where it's not really for the artist at all. The artists get the least, and it's, I can be a singer-songwriter, but you've got to look at these big artists like Van Morrison and Bob Dylan. Why are they continuing doing it? Why is he selling his back catalogue? Why is it? It's the only way they can earn money. They're still doing it. They're 80, 90 years old, you know what I mean? Still touring. They've had their day, but they're still doing it. But, it's very bizarre the way things have turned out. I watched a little documentary before about the record industry, and how the record industry got the money was years and years of ripping the artist off. That's why so many times you saw the artist or the band had to take the record label to court to get paid. So I mean, David Bowie, for instance, he didn't really start getting paid until mid-80s, really, because he just blew his budget on on production, and then he'd sit down with his accountant and say, you know what, how much money have we got? And then the accountant go, well, I've got paid, the crew's got paid, the production's got paid. In fact, we're 30 grand in debt, and you need to sign another 3 albums to sort that out. And then it's kind of like, oh. So now it's kind of, you know, I've been signed to independent labels. I've done things, but it's not what it was. It's not what it was at all. And it was weird, really, because once I worked on my last album, and I thought, right, this is going to break me in, and then I've got to work really hard. And then I got a bit of attention, and then I started playing these gigs, and I'm like, how am I getting these gigs? And these are decent gigs, and they're decent paid. And then this guy come up to me, and he was like, I really love your stuff, Steve. I'm part of an emo punk rock label, but I love what you do, and I want to try and help you. And if I knew what I knew now, I would have gone, no, it's fine. Thanks anyway. Because, you know, all the best intentions of the world. And I'm so grateful for that opportunity because, you know, it helped me get reviews and on playlists and stuff like that. And, you know, you can't knock any part of your journey towards that. But it's, if I've learned anything now, I'm 35 now, and I'm thinking, if I played the right gigs to the right audience, I would have been a lot further on in my career now. So I've supported rock bands and everything. And I'm like, I'm Americana with English roots, you know what I mean? I play, you know, I'm terrified of being predictable. So, you know, it's hard for people to, you know, put me in an umbrella genre because I'm a part of the generation where you find a lot of people my age and younger, they're not a part of the umbrella genre anymore. They're part of the subgenre. They're part of the niche. You know, it's like, well, if I'm not playing country and I'm playing folk, or if I'm playing a bit of soul or a bit of alternative or a bit of, you know, psychedelic folk rock without psychedelic, and, you know, but in that kind of thing, almost like a Ben Howdy kind of, you know, figure where he's like, oh, he's breaking the rules. What tuning's that? And kind of breaking off from John Martin. It's like, well, where do I fit? And it's, you know, you get a taste of what it's about, and everything looks glamorous when you look at it from afar, but it's not really. It's a slog, and it's hours and hours of your time. And it's like, if you're going to tour, then you've got to make so much sacrifice just to build that fan base. And it's all about the independent artist now. It's just what it's all about. It's not about that labels. It's not about.
So let's just question something. Okay. Because I often hear people say about the industry. And I'm just wondering, actually, whether that is something where we just need to stop thinking about it like that. Because there is something intrinsically sort of wrong in it, because it's an art form.
Yeah.
So as soon as you start talking about an industry, there's a mismatch somewhere along the line. Now, you know, I've spoken about it as being an industry, but really, in a way, it's like, well, what was there before that? There's always musicians.
Yeah.
But there wasn't an industry.
No.
There might have been a collective of musicians or whatever. And the well-to-do might have employed those musicians to do things. And the music was part of something else, you know, it was, you know, embedded into sacred music or embedded into cultural life of people. I'm just wondering where we sort of went down that route of the big money moving in. And obviously there was, somebody saw the opportunity to make money, I don't know, obviously before they made records, but maybe with the big operas and stuff like that, you know, or even music hall or something. But there was obviously the entrepreneur that would have made his money elsewhere if there weren't musicians.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we start falling down a hole. You start thinking about record companies and the fact that if they're going to look after musicians, well, obviously they're not, only to the point that the musician can make the money. I mean, you know, you've got lots of very famous cases of really famous musicians being dropped by a label because they weren't making the money anymore, or being totally ripped off in such a way you sort of go, how would they get away with that? Well, because nobody cares, basically, or they're in control of the media. You know, if you go back far enough, they certainly were. And I'm just wondering now whether we're returning to a point where, because obviously technology's out there, we could do this stuff on our own. And it's, but you know, potentially it's been possible to do that. It's just getting your voice heard, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
So anyway, let's just go back to your sort of roots and stuff. So we've got to the, you know, you hearing David Gray singing. You're saying about how important the song was, because I think you're absolutely right on this, because, you know, I'm coming from the perspective of the guitarist, you know, the technical guitar player.
Yeah, of course.
And they totally lose sight of what on earth they're doing music for, potentially, because it's all about the song.
Yes, true.
So what was your next step then? Were you already playing? You said you were playing electric guitar. So when did you start playing guitar generally?
When did I first start? About a year and a half after hearing Buddy Holly.
So when we're looking at roughly
14. Yeah, about 14 years old. Went to Florida. It was in Christmas time. And my dad was like, "What do you want?" I want an American standard. I want a nice sunbelt. I want Buddy Holly's guitar, maple neck, everything. And I really held a grudge with my dad because he ended up buying me a Mexican. And I'm like, "Dad, I want that guitar. That's the guitar I want." "Yeah, but that's like 700 quid cheaper." And I'm like, "But it's not what I want. Don't buy it for me." And he was like, "No, I'm going to get it for you." And I was like, "Oh." So I had this guitar for a long time and ended up selling it because I never ever wanted it. And anyway, so I got that. I bought some, you know, sheet music, and I was like, I can't give my time to reading music because it's like learning a different language, you know. I was like, if I do learn, because I'm the type of person, if I do learn something like that, it will put walls up around me, and then I'll be limited as to how I think I can get through to that. You know, I've listened to a bit of your interview with Rob Townley, and I got to the point where he said about he's played with, you know, classically trained musicians, and if you ask them to do something off the cuff, they just don't know what to do. And I'm like, really, with all that knowledge, you've still got to, you know, be on a lead almost. And I've played with musicians, and I just never got it. And I'm like, well, I don't want to be classically trained for one thing. I don't. No. So I kind of bypassed that, and I just looked, oh, that's how the tablature works. You know what I mean? And then I started to play. I was right out the back in an old shed, and I can remember it was just like, you know, literally the old shed was near the back field, and mice was getting in, and it was horrible. It was really damp and horrible. I had this little amp powered by this extension lead, and it got to a certain point, and my mum would be like, off, because I've been playing like A or D or E for like 2 hours trying to master the shapes of it all. And then, yeah, it was like that for a long time. And then I just got hungry to kind of play a few, you know, I mean, because tone all of a sudden come about, and I was like, oh, I can play G on this and then G on that, and then I can play G on the piano, and I feel differently about the song all of a sudden.
Yes.
Or just tone. This is why I've got a guitar lily there, I've got a mandolin there, and, you know, I've got a ukulele there, I've got my guitar, I've got my space echo, different things. So I think it's inevitable if you want to keep, you know, coming up with new, fresh ideas, you've got to be inspired within the realms of tone.
Yes.
Next thing will be a baritone guitar, you know.
No, I get that totally, because you know, I teach. Well, I say I teach songwriting. I don't like to call it that. I inspire people to write songs, basically.
Yes.
But one of the things
that's the best way to do it.
Well, it is, absolutely, because it's not.
Yeah. There's no. Listen, I always get a bit funny when people go, you know, 4 steps to writing a great tune, and I'm like,
Oh,
well,
it's rubbish. It's all
like,
nonsense.
you know, it's like, well,
Yeah, I know.
I've never known a good song to come out of that.
No.
A mediocre thing, yeah. I mean, like if you're trying to find something, you got a bit of writer's block. Me, I never have writer's block. I have melody block. If it's all about the melody, and if I get stressed about the melody, I've got to leave it. You know what I mean? I think I've become a better songwriter over time because I've, you know, there's a tune that I found out today. I was like, I can't get inspired by this and everything. I'm listening to quite a lot of Bert Jansch and John Martin, and I'm like, you start playing like that, and it's like, well, that's not why I watched it. You know what I mean? I just want to be inspired to kind of.
Okay, this is an interesting point. Let's just focus on that because you're saying a lot of things that are really, really important here. First of all, let's go back to the thing about tone. I think you know, when you start on a different instrument, you end up with a different song.
Yeah.
There's no two ways. There's no two ways about that. You know, if you and then it becomes a little bit of a personal thing. So, say for instance, you know, I wanted to write some sort of funky number, I'd start with a bass.
Yeah.
You know, that's just the way it works for me. But that sort of thing of all that stuff you see on the internet, that's all about trying to get people to watch your video type of thing. It's all nonsense because even down to structure, you know, why do we have songs that do verse, chorus, middle eight, or whatever, you know, bridge? It you know, that's packaging. Because if a song arrives, and you'll know exactly what I mean, it arrives in the way it wants to be when you let it.
Exactly. You can't force it. You can't shape it. It just happens. It's like Dylan said. Just to digress 2 seconds. Well, it's not digressing. Just adding on to what you're saying. But somebody said, "How do you structure a song?" He said, "I just get in the way. I'm just in the way. I'm just a vehicle it flows through."
Yeah, exactly.
And that's it.
Yeah. You see, somebody said to me, it's a sort of a form of alchemy. You're part of the alchemy, but you're just there. You know, you're just there, and it's part of the process. You don't write the song.
No, you don't.
You know, in a way, the song writes you.
Yeah.
And I think this is very true. And again, it's almost like what I was saying about the music industry thing. We've got that very term, the music industry, is a very, very sort of left-brained, analytical way of doing stuff. But really, we're dealing, and you're saying lots of things, but we're very, very sort of right-brained. You know, the big sort of picture thing, which is very difficult to pin down. You know, it's about tone. Yeah, what does that mean? Well, it's about tone. You know, and all that sort of stuff. Or it might be.
It's almost like being a part of a different culture, what nobody understands.
Yes.
It really is a culture thing. I mean, you know, you can't give if you haven't got, and you can't, you know, if you haven't got it, you can't give it. It's that kind of, you've got to be there. You've got to be for it. It's you know, it's a funny thing that you wouldn't put yourself through the pain of it if you didn't love it as much.
Oh no, absolutely. In actual fact, if somebody said to you, "Okay, you want to be a musician. Now let's just let for a moment you experience what it's like to be a musician." You'd go like, after that, you'd think, "No, I'll do something else."
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's like a lot of things in life that are actually worth doing. It's painful to do.
It's painful, yeah. I think, you know, I think it goes back to the kind of blessing and the curse thing.
Yes.
I mean, you work so much for that's just that little piece of motivation, that, you know, encouragement. I mean, you know, I think it goes through every, unless you're established and you earn a living like that and you haven't got to think about anything. But there's, I can't believe it. I've got somebody at the door. Can I just?
Right. Yeah, I'll pause it.
Sorry.
Right. After that brief intermission, right, we were just generally talking about the way that, you know, how difficult music is, and you're playing for that sort of moment.
Yeah.
And all the difficulties that evolve around that. And you were saying about, you know, for some musicians who don't really have to think about it because
of course,
they're always sort of in full flow now.
Yeah.
You know, it's very difficult when you.
I know what I was going to say now.
Yeah. So
There's,
far away.
you write differently in desperation. If everything's hanging on that next thing, you write so differently. Um, I read through, where is it? David Gray's a biography. It's not a official biography, but it was someone who was kind of following him around in his early days, and it gets me excited as a songwriter because of the process and the build up. And he signed to a dying label, which was EMI, and then they kind of took him to the back end of a North American tour, and then he's like, I've got famously billed under Barbecue Spare Ribs, 9 o'clock. David Gray sold out. Now, me at this time, I'd be like, I'll be happy with that. I've got a sold out show, whether it's under McDonald's. I don't care. But I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, and then he got asked the question, is there any low points of your career? And he was like, yeah, of course there was. He said, but I wouldn't change any. He said, because it's led to this point.
Exactly.
And he said, like, his breakthrough album, White Ladder, he chose not to sign any of his deals. And and then he literally remortgaged his house. He had a flat in Hackney. His wife was a lawyer. As a super fan, I'll know these things, because you tend to dig a bit deeper because
Of course you do, yeah, absolutely.
Want to know what shapes him, that kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
Without being a bit odd.
No, this is why I do this podcast, Stu.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so he chose not to sign his deals and everything. Remortgaged his house. He bought all the equipment for Pro Tools, and he's like, as we were doing it, we were literally recording it, tracking it, and then he was turning the page of how to edit it. He said, so it was literally the next thing to do, get the book out. Then he'd start writing into the wee hours and everything. But then because he established a bit of a fan base in Ireland with his first record, A Century Ends, he jumped on that bandwagon, so I got this new track. And then it gained traction. But it was only till then. And I really respect him as an artist and his management because he's not a part of a label. He's got his own label. And a lot of people go, this is the thing, about TikTok and stuff. It's always about that instant thing. Yeah, they kind of do the John Gom thing and it's twisting and turning and pop slapping and everything. But after 20 minutes of that, there's something inside that shuts down. And it goes back to the old blues players toe tapping on the veranda, singing about what they really think. And that's what I'm heading to, Yeah. It leaves you with just, I know it's a cliche. It's such a cliche. I wish there was another word for it, but 3 chords and the truth. I hate that because it's been used to death, but that's what it's about. It's either overly complicated with.
Let's just focus on that because I think that's a really good point. Because I think there is something, we've commoditized music, right? We've commoditized the arts, we've commoditized everything so that basically something can be sold.
Exactly.
But if we just sort of step back from that a little bit and think about, well, a lot of the great music was made by people who weren't making any money, which is what you pointed out at the beginning.
Yeah.
Right. And there's something else going on, okay. A lot of my interests come from sort of root styles of things like blues, reggae particularly, and sort of early rock and sort of rock and roll stuff. But the thing is, I also sort of train in sort of classical and and meddle around with jazz and things. But the point about it is that those early root styles, you can listen to a piece of music, it could be the most shocking recording, and it could be out of time, out of tune, and it just hits you. And you think, that doesn't make any sense logically, but there is something in it that's sort of like you can't get out of your head. And I sort of pondered that quite a bit. So when you look at people like that who have sort of crafted their way almost to the point they could put anything on the line, they believe in what they're doing, they believe in the song that they've written, because really, like any great song, on the face of it, it could be rejected by lots of people before it's spotted.
exactly.
And it's like
Almost like
sometimes,
a B-side album. People
yeah,
look at that and they go, "Oh," but then that becomes so important because it bypasses the commercial and it's the personal straight away. Nothing's there to. It's not prettied up.
no,
It's the bare essential. It's this what come out. Sorry, stop it.
yeah, no, that is right. And you see, that's the thing that I've sort of thought about quite a bit with this, because we've now taken that commoditization to such an extreme. It's really killed a lot of the essence of what. I'm not saying there's not good music out there, because there is some, but it's really difficult to find it.
Oh,
Um,
it is
you know,
because it's not. It's just not being promoted. I mean, like if I think one of the hardest times to kind of stand out or get noticed was like the Jimi Hendrix era and the Eric Clapton era and the Queen era and the Led Zeppelins, because they were actually brilliant musicians that kind of thought outside the box. And it's like that's, but that would have been a time where I thought I've really got up my game. I ain't got no chance. But then I don't know. It comes back to the melody thing again. It comes back to that. Yeah, you can play intricate guitar, which is great, but then it can have no heart attached to it.
well, the interesting thing is you quoted a whole bunch of musicians who not only were great musicians, they were great songwriters.
They were great songwriters.
So it's an interesting thing that Clapton's direction, obviously, certainly after the Cream, and certainly by the end of the Cream, was just to be a better songwriter.
Yeah.
You can see that.
Oh,
And Hendrix's thing is that he wrote some amazing songs.
yeah.
And obviously Zeppelin, it's sort of, goes without saying, really. But that's the thing. Where is it that sort of musicality has been sort of, again, I think it's that analytical thing. What is it that makes that song so good? Oh, it must be, because you can't really, it's really difficult to define a good melody, isn't
Oh,
it?
it really is. Oh, it really is.
So tell me, what's the effect when you've found the melody? What's it do to you?
Well, there's very few things in my life that make me happy. A few of them things is a good relationship with the wife, good foundation. That's great. Make sure the children are happy. If the children are happy, that creates joy in me. But the third thing would be once I get that melody and I'll finish that song, I am elated beyond words because I'm like, oh, I haven't lost it. It's almost affirmation all the time. But
Yeah.
sorry, what was the question again? I tried to.
Well, what's that feeling?
It.
What's the feeling when you? How do you know you got a good melody?
Because I love it.
Ah,
I love it, and I look at it and think, would I buy this or not? Yes, I would absolutely buy it. So yeah, it's just that I've got to love it, and if I love it, I'll know everybody else will love it, and that's all the confirmation I need, really. But you get it's very bizarre, because we there's different sections within musicians and songwriters. It's like I ain't got a lot in common with a musician, really. Because my kind of way of finding it is I'm not knowledgeable about the fretboard and all that. My way of approaching music is so far in me that it's like how can I put it in a tangible way? I'll be in a pitch black room on one corner and I'm finding my way to the switch. And as soon as I hit that switch, that's when the wellspring of creativity just pours and pours and pours. And I just think of everything else as limitations. It's almost like recording and producing your own stuff. It's like, well, that's going to take me away from the melody. And that's what it's all about. So I would rather work part-time job or something to save up for the album so that I can, because I'm like, I don't want a great song and a mediocre recording. I want the best of everything. It's like buying a brand new Martin D41. I had one. I didn't have a connection with it.
No.
I mean, and so it's got everything's got to work, and it's got to be like a domino effect.
Mm.
You know, a lot of it is. I mean, if you're gonna have a team around you, especially in the studio, they've got to be like family. Because if not, you're presenting your baby to somebody that's not going to care for it how you think, and it goes back to that. So I don't ever think that there's one answer to music or
No.
the song, because I've spent 5 minutes on a song and it's a great melody. All the melody's in the vocal. I just play it 2 or 3 chords or whatever, and I do a little, you know, arpeggio piece or a little fill in, or but that's not what it's about. It's about the song. I struggle playing to other musicians because they're forever looking at what you're doing, and it's a very shallow thing. And it's like, stop looking at that. Look at the melody. Look at the melody. That's why I love working with Rob Townley. Rob Townley can do. He's probably one of the best guitarists I know. I haven't worked with a lot of guitarists, but he can serve a song so beautifully. It's all about tone with him. It's all about feel. It's all about the next thing. This is why he's branching out and recording leaves and trees, because he loves it so much. He's trying to engross himself in that. And you know, I've played before. I've played support bigger artists, and they're noodling, and I'm like, you're not in a guitar shop showing everything you've got on this guitar. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in what else you bring. It's almost like everybody wants the noise, but I'm trying to now use the silence as another instrument.
Mm.
And the only way I can put that is that if I'm playing in the right venue to the right people, it's almost like a fire, and the embers are going up, and the darkness is sucking itself to that ember, and you can't take your eyes off the ember. So, but what really makes that ember shine through is the darkness. It's the silence. It's the space, and it's. I mean, I'll get goose pimples just thinking about it,
Mm.
because it's all about that melody. But going back a little bit about these artists that were great songwriters, I think there were deeper things at play
Yes.
to create them melodies.
Yes.
I mean, like, if you look at the laws of physics, like bodily physics, that there's vibrations in your waters, and then it sends signals to your heart. And I'm a born again Christian, so But the thing, I study the Bible, going back to the Aramaic root and to the Hebrew root, and there's a verse in there that says, the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. And we're always thinking it's the mind, but now scientists are discovering that there's brain cells in the heart.
Yes.
It blows my mind, and I'm thinking, what? We think in our heart before, and it's like,
Well, that's
that
what
makes so much more sense.
basically, from a Eastern perspective and all the rest of it, is they knew that anyway.
Yeah.
So that was always the thing. And of course, now there's some sort of theories about certain aspects of thinking, like, as I was saying, like right side, left side hemisphere. But the right side is much more heartfelt.
Yeah.
And as you say, there are brain cells in the heart, brain cells in the stomach.
Yeah.
So you sort of look at that and you go, okay, this is much more integrated.
Yeah.
And of course, there's a lot of ways of thinking about creativity, which doesn't necessarily use the mind, the brain, if you like. So cool. Now, so a couple of things here.
Okay.
When did you write something that you suddenly went, I like that? When did you do that? The first time that you sort of wrote
First
something?
time, there was a song called Love Songs. It was inspired by a bit of James Blunt and Jason Mraz. And I just wanted to, I didn't really know what direction I wanted to go in. And this was pre-finding out about DADGAD and Open A and that kind of thing.
So we're going to get onto that in a minute as well.
Okay, cool. And so yeah, I just knew I had something. But it's got to be a personal thing before it's anybody else's. It's really bizarre, because I've started to realise that off the back of that if I don't like it, it's not going to land. But if I like it, I'll put everything into it, and I'll sing it and almost use my eyes as kind of a, you know, to connecting with people, to say, listen, I'm believing what I'm saying here. You know what I mean? This comes from something other than me. And whether that resonates with people or don't impress people, that, you know, you can't please everybody all the time, for one thing. And you've really got to get to a point in your career where you've literally got to accept that. And because that will hold you back. I can remember, you know, I won't say who it was, but it was a person who was really close to me, said after this last album, going, I don't know how you're going to top this last album. I don't think you will. And I believed them. And then I had writer's block for 2 years. And, I thought, I've lost it. But it's when that person's opinion didn't mean anything to me, that's when I started opening up again. And it's kind of, so the first song was Love Songs. And then it just kind of, you know, come a domino effect. And then I wrote that. And then I was like, right, one thing I don't want to be is predictable. I don't want to be predictable. You know, how many times have you seen an artist where you're like, oh, they're great, they're brilliant, and you get past the third song and you're like,
yes.
oh, I know
Yes.
what they're going to be doing.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
I'm terrified of being predictable.
Yeah.
So, you know,
don't you think that's something about, like, you know, if you think about songs as being a narrative, not necessarily a narrative that you know where it's going. I'm not saying that. A bit like a sort of old-fashioned myth or saga or you know, fairy story, and you really don't know what's going to happen next, and something weird happens, but there's still a narrative structure. Don't you think that's true with songs, that you want that sort of thing? I didn't expect that moment. Otherwise, it just makes people sort of fall asleep.
It do really. See, I think no matter what you're doing, if you can find that element of mystery in it, it just keeps you going. If it's so black and white, if it's so structured, if it's so you can see from one end to the end, I'm just not interested. I lose focus really easy, and that's why, you know, if you get a good musician, it's not even about that. It's about, you know, a performer or whatever they do. It's got to be more than the music. They've got to have more than the music. First time I've truly realised that, I was supporting a band called the Reed Brothers, and I harp on about it sometimes. The first time I went on tour in San Antonio in Texas, and there's a different, you know, feel about going to a place where you bypass the commercial and you're in the rural. You're actually seeing the way people live, and it's like, this is Texas. This is the struggle. I mean, like, guys were playing. I mean, they had like 3 jobs. One day they get up and then they'll be making pizza bases, and then they've been loading shelves, and then they'll be road sweeping, and then they'll drive 7 hours to Fort Worth to play an half-an-hour gig. And it's like, you know, I've played gigs in Dronfield, and I'm like, oh, 3 hours, it's going to kill me. But I'm like, these guys find pleasure in it. And it's kind of, you look at it and you think to yourself, they might not have a great deal of money, but they got so much passions. And I mean, like, if you went over there, you either get inspired or disheartened, because there'd be a 15, 16-year-old boy knows everything about the fretboard, and you're sitting and going, oh, mate, I've got to up my game or just give up, you know. But it's, you know, that's why you got to personalise it. I should be much better on the guitar, but I choose to be all about the melody and the song, because I know somebody else can do that part. I can write it in my mind, and I can write in it. I can do the same thing. It might take me a little while to get there, but I'll still do it. But my focus is on that song. And when I first supported them, they was in a place called, I think it was called the Harp Strung or something like that. It was in Folkestone, and they played for 20 minutes with just them 2 guitars, and I cried for an hour. Like a baby. I couldn't stop myself. I was siphoning, and the guy was like, I felt so embarrassed, but I just couldn't control it. And I was like, I felt a part of heaven in this room. You done something. I don't know what you've got, but I want it, and I'm going to try everything I can to get there. And he just said, I just love it, dude. And that was it. And then off the back of that, I went home and I said, said to my wife, and I think I just had one at the time, my little Noah, and I was like, babe, could you just get out of the room for the day so I can have the front room and just go out? Just because I rehearsed for 4 hours. My fingers were nearly bleeding. I'm like, I can't believe I've done this to me. I've got to play tonight. You're playing and you leave it and you come back. And I played in a little place called, I think it was the Barn. It was the worst pub in the world. It's called Bedford. It is, because it's literally, if you like your ales and stuff, there's like 30 different ales. And it's like, this is great. I just test every one and I'm going to be on my arse at the end. But I played, and off the back of that, he said, we've released an album or an EP. Would you like to come over ours for 2 weeks? We'd love you to support us. And I'm like, hard work pays off.
Mm.
And you've still got to have that mentality in a world where they feel entitled, and it's difficult. And you know what I mean? It's, as creatives, you know, it's very bizarre what's expected of us. We've still got to play into a certain narrative or a certain agenda in order to be accepted. You can't think outside the box no more. And to think always on your right side of your mind and not you know, it's I love being a free thinker. I love thinking. I love diluting it. You know, I love digesting it and regurgitating and looking at it from a different aspect. But we're living in a time now where if you don't pick a side, it's and it's hard to think like that when I've never ever thought like that. But because there might have been a certain narrative or somebody's in power that nobody likes, and that person might be in power, and then people want the right to do something are criticising the person, and they're making themselves sound hypocrites because they're calling that person the very thing that they want the right for.
Yes, I know.
And I'm like, hold up a minute, why can't people see past a certain facade or what this thing is housing?
I think, in actual fact, you know.
Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I know exactly. I think I know exactly what you're saying. I think what's happening now is that there's a lot of the illusions of things that we were taken in by it. They're sort of becoming difficult to withstand now, because it's like you look at those and you think, well, that's rubbish.
Yeah.
When you start to see that things are hypocritical, and again, you know, that might be your role as a songwriter anyway, to be able to see that, because I think that is true. As an artist, you do see the world differently to ordinary people.
I mean, like you would being confined to a room on a screen, and it's very bizarre how even things, you know, I think Hitler said, if you say a lie for long enough, people start to believe it.
Yeah.
And it's like,
it was Goebbels, actually.
Oh, was it Goebbels? Sorry.
No, you're near enough.
Near enough, yeah. But it's very bizarre. I mean, like even propaganda. I know we're going off topic here.
No, you're not going off topic.
It's kind of like, if you actually looked at, you know, not justifying it, but the power of propaganda will stop you from seeing Stalin, who killed hundreds and hundreds of million, or, you know, whatever. But then the power of propaganda will make you focus on, but it's very bizarre, really, because the way society is going now, it's being run by people that don't know or understand what the build up to. Like, I watched this guy, who was a journalist, who was going around asking people, saying, do you know who Hitler is? And I was like, no. And I'm like, you need to know your history, because what you're doing may lead to what's going to happen. And so people don't really understand the construct of how socialism gets there, communism, capitalism. And if you don't know, and if you're, you know, tearing away history, then you're doomed to repeat it. You really are.
Well, also, I mean, the other thing that's, you know, you're going on that.
I'm trying to say so much without saying the obvious. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know.
People
need to take. They need to take charge of what they know, how they look after themselves, how they feed themselves, look after their health, and all the rest of it. They need to take charge of that, because it's been through, you know, good intents and purposes, you know, good intentions. we've ended up becoming disempowered. And,
Yeah,
and the same thing goes with the whole thing about creativity. Children are taught in school not to be creative. Not deliberately so, but it just is the way it is. Because if you've got to give the right answer, you can't give the creative answer, can you?
you can't give the creative answer. And
No.
I heard a really good quote, and it really cut me to heart. And it said, "In the school systems today, children are not taught how to think, but what to think."
Yeah,
And that
totally.
really,
And it's been
it was
like
like
that.
an eye-opening moment. I was like,
It's been
oh,
like that for quite some time, but
yeah,
it's got worse.
yeah.
We have to get back to having more divergent ways of thinking because that's how nature works.
You can't hem an artist in. You can't put him. You can't put
Well,
him in for.
it's not natural.
It's not.
If you look at nature's just biodiversity in the most extreme, and we are not like that, and we need to be like that because anything in nature that isn't biodiverse gets wiped out very quickly.
Oh, very, very much.
And we're doing it with our thinking. We've done it with our thinking. We need more different ways of thinking about things. And we're not, and at the moment, it's even worse. The thing that we thought was going to make all things possible has actually become the thing itself that's trapping us.
You know what? There's a question what I put out not too long ago, and a lot of people say yes, you can, but can you have love without hate? I don't think you can.
I don't think you can because it's a polarity, and we have to understand.
There is.
And that's the thing. It's about, and I interviewed somebody a little while back, a guy called Satishkumar, who's a peace activist, and he's one of the most amazing people I've ever met. This guy, became famous for walking from India to Moscow, to Paris, London, and then eventually, because Bertrand Russell paid for tickets for him and the person he walked with to go to America, and then he walked to Washington. So they were the capitals that had nuclear weapons at the time.
Right.
With no money. No money.
Right.
So he's a Gandhian, but he was completely at the mercy of people and their generosity. And he was, it was a protest about nuclear weapons. Now, Satish he's in his 80s now. He's like sort of mid to late 80s. And he's still an active political thinker. And he said, the big mistake that people make is that peace isn't the absence of war.
No.
Peace is something else.
It's inside.
It's something else. It's not the absence of war. Peace is something that you have to generate, right? And I just thought that was great, because the thing is that we get locked into polarities, right? So in the same way that love is not the absence of hate, but the point is that there is a sort of night dark thing, and that's how we tend to think. But really, you can break those things and create other polarities. But that's just something that we're stuck in a way of thinking.
Yeah. Well, I said, I think it's in the Hebrew text. Peace means shalom, and shalom. It's not the absence of war.
No,
it's perfect peace inside.
Yes,
it's sleeping through the war.
Yes,
you know what I mean. It's having peace in spite.
Yes, So it's not absence of war.
It's not at all. And it's weird how the thing it's like vanity for the senses nowadays. Why do we go, to the Dominican Republic or New Zealand? It's just to fulfill our own desires, really. I mean, if you can treat where you're at like them places, then you don't need them places.
No.
People always trying to rush to get there. and it's always a stress and stress and stress. You know, like people overemphasize and are going about smoking and drinking. Yeah, you consume too much, you're going to die. Smoking should be a no-no anyway. You know, a little bit of alcohol is good for you, but you know, everything's excessive because they're trying to. It's like there's something empty inside that they're trying to fulfill this, and it just keeps falling out. So everyone seems to be unfulfilled. You know, even like as I said before about the song. It's, you know, I get the song, but that will only keep me for a certain time or a certain while before I need the next buzz.
Yeah.
So everyone needs a buzz.
You know? And everybody needs
chasing the high. That's what I call it.
Yeah, it sort of is. I mean, that's the thing. It's like everything, isn't it? You know, all those sort of desires. You know, it depends where they're placed, really.
Yeah, it is really.
So, now tell me about your tunings, because we said about that, and you have said. So you've got a lot of tunings that you use. So tell me.
Well, I'm starting to. I mean, I got stuck on Dadgad for a long time because I was getting so much out of it. And I got songs like...
Well, it's quite good, isn't it?
It's great. I mean, it's just, you know, but then after a little while, it's weird because every guitarist or musician plays Dadgad differently. And it's very bizarre because I'll look and I go, oh, you're playing more the high-endy stuff.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah,
more kind of Bert Yancey folky stuff. But then I'll go to the blues stuff, you know, and that kind of thing. So yeah, I've just started because I love a lot of strings to my bow, and I like playing something that's, you know, simple and I go, oh, it's just one of them. But then I'll come out with something like a song I've got called "Pushing Me Away," which took a year to finish, not because I couldn't have finished it. It's just I wanted, you know, it's going back to that just being there for that moment. So I'll write something and I'm like, it's too good to rush. It's too good, you know what I mean? I haven't got full knowledge of what Dadgad can do at the moment. I just left it. And then I found out about harmonics and I thought, if I use that and then I use the bottom string as a rundown, and then I was like, oh, it's opened up again. And it's like, I can actually do a little bit of a solo here because it's so open. I can just pulsate the bottom string and then it's like a bass running through it and that kind of thing. So there's that element to it. And then I found out about open A. And then I was like, well, that's pretty simple. But then I was like, can't really do a lot on this. And I started to write a song called I Cry For You. And it's bizarre, really, the kind of story behind the song. Because it goes back to when I was younger. And I used to go about with this guy whose mum used to go about with this lady who was married to this really lovely guy who's hardworking. They had 2 kids. But there was one day when I went out with the family in London, and she ended up messing about with this other guy. And it was the very first time I saw it because I come from a close-knit family and, you know, a solid family. I thought, how could she do this to these kids? And it really affected me. And then I tried, and then it come back to me. And it made me feel sick to my stomach, really. Because every time you saw him, he didn't want to get in too much conversation, just in case you knew too much about his life, and then he'd be like, "All right, yeah, see you later." So he didn't want to hear anything. That's what I'm trying to, you know. But then it comes to a point where it's like, okay, I know the situation, and now I've got to Hollywoodize it with a beautiful melody, and come out with my perspective of it. And you know, I thought I need something different. Because I got stuck into a stage where I was so uninspired by lockdown, I just couldn't get past the standard tuning and just straight chords. And I'm like, because I didn't really want to. And I was like, I don't know, I'll take a course and I'll be an electrician and then that'd just be a thing. And I lost it for a little while. And then I picked it up. And the funny thing was, it's like the capo's on like the 9th fret and I'm sitting thinking, I'm doing so much with this.
Yeah.
Right up the neck and doing the harmonics and tapping and stuff like that. And then I was like, right, I'm thinking outside the box again. And I stopped believing what that person said, that I can't get better than that. And as soon as that released, then there was a wellspring of creativity. And then there's drop D. And, you know, I tend to stay away from open E because I'm always snapping a string because it goes up with open E. Unless you're going to go down and it buzzes and it's like, oh.
Yeah.
So it's just bringing something fresh every time.
It's interesting because I was talking about tunings. I was in where was I? I was in South America, and I don't travel very much, to be quite frank. But we were in South America, in Ecuador, and we were. I Yeah, we were in a city somewhere, but in the sort of the part of the city that people looked at you and like,
Yeah.
you're not from these parts type of thing. And there was a guy with a suit on, with a, you know, it's called a Panama hat, but
Right. Okay.
apparently they don't come from Panama, they come from Ecuador, these hats.
Ah.
He was sitting there with this Panama hat on, beautiful suit, but he was obviously just an ordinary guy, but he was really nicely turned out, sitting on a street corner playing guitar. And it was just in standard tuning. But of course, really, standard tuning is sort of E minor ish, E minor 11, but it's E minor. So you've got your open strings, your bass E, and then your top strings is an E minor chord. And he was using that. So you could see that he wasn't taught, he was self-taught. We sat there and he played, and it sounded beautiful.
Yeah.
And I looked at that and I thought, that spoke a lot to me about the guitar. That, he understood that by just doing very simple things, you could hit all the chords that were necessary in that key. Yeah. And he was playing it like it was in a special tuning, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, that's true.
And I just sort of sat and watched this guy for quite some time, and it was just it was amazing just seeing that, because it was sort of weird being a guitar player in another country, seeing somebody else play and being able to learn something from that moment.
It was lovely.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing about tunings, because you could just make anything up. Make life easier for yourself by just changing the tuning, because really that's all it's about.
Yeah,
really, isn't it?
I think I got obsessed with Dadgad because there's very little you've got to do to make
exactly,
to not make a mistake.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lovely tuning, isn't it?
And even if you do make a mistake, you can always recover from it. And it's I just love it. It's just a great tuning. But the thing is, you've got to know when you've done something to death. You've just got to know, and you've got to I've got to think outside the box again. I've actually got to think about what I'm doing. But it's all about serving the song.
Yeah.
It's all about serving the song. I mean, I played. It's bizarre. You can't even assume what people like. You just can't do that.
No.
By the way they dress, by the way they conduct themselves, you just can't do it. I used to, and then I got, humbled very quickly, and I'm like, I've got to shut up now, and I've got to stop thinking like that way. And for instance, my wife's got a friend, and everything she wears is designer. Everything she's got is money. Everything worth, she's got something. And, she's a lovely lady. But I'd look at her and go, she probably likes a bit of R&B or new pop or a bit of grime. And I gave her a CD, and the first song that I thought she was going to like Move On because it's a bit soulful, or Fix Me because it's a little bit alternative. And she liked the folkiest song on there. I'm like, what? What? Are you serious? What? And she's like, yeah, it just grabbed my attention. I'm like, yeah, and it's like the least song for me, but yeah, it's bizarre, really, because
it is bizarre, isn't it? When you do something and you get lots of people telling you that's the best song on the album, and they're all completely different.
Yeah, all completely different. Exactly. Well, it's my first EP was very, it was a big production, but then I was like, they're good songs, but I can't emulate that live.
No.
Yeah. And I'm not going to do the Ed Sheeran thing because he's done it in such a way that if people do that, it only reminds them of that.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm like, okay, right, that's his thing. I can't do that. And then you can't, I was like, I can't emulate it. And then I went into the acoustic where I wrote a cracking song called Living on Faith. And then there was another song called Misfits. And I'm really, really proud of that 2-track single. Because of not only because of the process, but what I tend to do is write something straight, get the melody, and I go, right, let's detune it. Let's see if I can find something. And that happened with that track. And then I found out about that. I'll give you a little, insight of how this went. So I got the song, was happy with it. It was in Dadgad, had a bit of a funky kind of bluesy way about it. I was like, this is cool. And then I had an hour before I had to leave. It was early in the morning. Got up at 7, leaving at 8. Got to Paul West studio, Awesome Soul Studios in New Ash Green for 9. But before that, I put the kettle on, made a cup of coffee, and inside the washing up bowl there was a dead moth. And rather than scooping it out, I took a picture of it. So I took a few pictures of it, and then I scooped it out and started with it. And I thought, why did I do that? I just wanted to capture something. Anyway, in the studio, we tracked it. Just before, then I sung it, and he was doing a bit of edit. And he was like, let's double track it. I was like, okay. But as I was tuning up, I made up a little riff. And I was like, Paul, just stop what you're doing for me. He's like, what? I said, just play the intro to see if this works over it. And then it worked over it really well. I was like, okay, cool. I said, I don't want any drums on it, just the cajon, the drum box. I was like, okay. I've got a space echo pedal so I can mess about with the intensity, so I can just record it, just spontaneously, and then he can cut and put it in the right places. That's okay. But then there was the other, and so as he's editing, I've looked online. I thought, what does a butterfly even mean? A moth even mean? And I kept going through, and because the song's called "Living on Faith," right at the end of the meaning of it, it meant faith. And I was like, that's the cover. So that's the front cover. And then before that, I was like, I want to create a bit of a dynamic from the intro. I said, could you put the click track in my ears, and then I can play towards it, and then I can just record it, a rough audio on the phone. Then I can send you that audio. And then it was amazing how it happened, because it started off with just a rough bit of recording on the audio. And then the new part that I wrote, it layered with it. And then when the bass and the beat come in, it went into the studio. And then it becomes something. So I love the spontaneity of doing stuff.
Yeah, it sounds really good.
But with what you said about earlier, once the premise is there, once the foundation's there, you can do anything. I think Sting said it. He said, if you respect that, you can do anything you want. And then, if you're really creative, you start becoming a little bit like Radiohead or something. Like they're honouring the premise, but they're not respecting where it's going. I love that. I'm sorry.
No, that's brilliant. So what you're doing now?
Now I'm a quarter of the way from a new album. These songs that I've kind of gleaned over the last couple of years, stuff that I wrote in lockdown, stuff that I've just not wanted to rush, just because I've had a great verse and a great chorus. Because I'm like, there's nothing worse than getting a song where it's a great verse and chorus, and they got a naff bridge or something like that. And it's like, I know you rushed that bit. Why did you rush that bit? And yeah, that kind of thing. So I'm a quarter of the way through. I'm recording it in, where am I recording it? Recording it in Cheltenham, in the old Cotswolds there, with one of my best mates, Rob Townley, as you know. No, Rob Townley. And it was going to be Paul West, but it was just the budget, and because I'm where I am, I'm like, okay. And then Rob's like, you know what, I'm building up my back catalogue, and I'll be honoured to work on this project with you. And he's invested in mics, and he's done so much for me. And he's doing a great job with it. So yeah, I'm quarter way through a new album. I wrote a little single with a guy called James Kirby. Have you heard of James Kirby?
Rings bell, does it?
It'd be good if you get in contact with him and get him on an interview. He's a working artist. He's great at what he does. He basically, I knew of him, and then we were speaking to each other, and then he's like, I'm a fan of your music, man. I was like, really? What, you? And he was like, yeah, man. He said, I've got a new studio and that now, and I want to branch out a bit as well as doing my own stuff. I'd love you to come down, and if you've got a song that you'd like to work on. I was like, brilliant. And then there was one, I was at a real low point, and I wrote a song called Fly, and it's really, really reminiscent of kind of 60s Joan Boaz kind of feel to it. It's a really simple song to play, but I literally was in the garden. I just bought this camera, just a Canon 600D, and I recorded it outside, sitting near a fence with the flowers and the birds singing, and I put a little bit of reverb on the video and sent it to him, and he was like, "Can we work on this? This is a little masterpiece." And I was like, "That's not a masterpiece," and he's like, "It is. It's going to really grab people," and I'm in the middle of doing that, which was a lovely weekend. Really, it was 4 days. So first day we was tracking, and he's going to be a good producer because the only type of producer that I work with is those that gets into the mind of the song.
Yeah.
I mean, like Paul West is brilliant for that. He's great at the producing side, but if he's like another artist in there, just saying he's great with harmony. He's brilliant, and it's like trying to break out of that mold of working with somebody else.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it?
You're so used to just that person, but then you're like, I don't want this album sounding a number 2 of the last one just because of the way they work or something. And I had to break that mold, but I still wish I could just get him in the studio just to go, can I pay you just to listen to these songs and tell me what it needs? And it's so yeah, to answer your question, I do beat around the bush, and I do try and elaborate as much as I can, and I do apologise for that. But yeah, in the middle of an album, got a new single in the works, and I'm starting to book up some really good gigs for next year, which are really well paid, and I'm playing at the right gigs to the right audience. And I supported a guy called Luke Jackson. He's a folk artist. He's great. You can tell that he's been nurtured on the road from a young age. He knows how to perform. He knows how to grab people's attention. He's got such a great range. Literally him, the acoustic guitar with an octave pedal, which works as a bass on top. And I was like, oh, this is brilliant. And he plays a lot of folky kind of tradition, not traditional, but like modern traditional, but it's still story song. And I supported him. And then afterwards, he's like, after everything I played, because, there's a element of you that wants to impress. I just want to, just to get that little, it's all affirmation. It's all, keep going, brother, you're brilliant. And the very song that I thought he wouldn't like, he adored it. And he kept going on and on about it. It's like, that's amazing, that melody you captured. And I was like, really? That took me about 20 minutes to do.
Yeah, well, it's not the way, though.
Yeah, it is really. So, yeah, I've got things in the pipeline. I'm playing a lovely gig next year in it's called the Village Concerts. I think it's happening in Buckinghamshire or somewhere like that. But I'm starting to realise that, when you first start out, you're like, I need a connection. I need to be playing here. I need to be playing that. But everyone's got their own journey. And as soon as I realised that, because I asked Luke Jackson, I was like, basically, how did you get a booking agent? Is there a way that you can help me, to do that? And then he's like, I was just fortunate. He was going to make a decision of going to university, and then I think it was Amy Wadge or something like that. She was touring, and then her management come to him and said, we want to put you in the studio, right? Just you and the acoustic guitar, 4 tracks, and then you've got something to sell to people when you're on the road. And he said, and then that skyrocketed, and now he's a part of a management company. I think there's a guy called Willie Thomas or Willie Jones or something. I can't think of the name of the guy, but he's a real established artist, and he's starting to get places now. And I started to realise, like, it's not as easy as just sending an email. Or getting in contact with this or submitting this and submitting that. It's about being on the road, really taking advantage of them friendships, but doing it in an authentic way. Don't just do it just to get yourself somewhere, because then you end up living a lie. But it's like, there's opportunities come up just because I've befriended people. We become real friends, and they want the best for me. So I'm in the process now of just cutting everybody out. It's a terrible thing to say, but you've got to cut people out of your life. What holds you back? If that's
sometimes, things change, don't they?
Things change all the time. And I mean, I'm 35 years old now. People say, oh, you're only a baby, but in my mind, I'm running out of time. And I'm like, but at the same time, it's like, I've got to put a cap on success. I watched an interview with John Mayer, and he said, I've got 2 types of friends. he said, I've got one friend that's, wants to do everything independently, and his goal is to sell 5,000 records after. And then once he achieves that, he's succeeded. But then the next album, he wants to sell 10,000. So that's more and more. He said, but then I've got other friends, they've sold 27 million copies of their album, and it's not enough. So I think, if it becomes anything other than the music, then you lose something. And I've been victim to that, because I got vain. I started to work out, and I thought I'd change my image, and then I sucked something out of my music into myself, and I started to look at myself a lot more. I was more critical, and I was like, I'm becoming to be so shallow, and I literally stopped working out and started eating crap again just because I didn't want to be shallow. It was a stupid thing to do, but I done it because I can't stand. Yeah, I've got a gym at the back. I've started to work out. I'm starting to feel good, but I make sure there's no mirrors in there. I do it, but I don't think about it when I'm doing. I'm writing a song while I'm doing it. I've got to keep away from these things, but I just want to attach themselves to me and take me away from what I believe that I was born to do. And it's you're fighting for that melody every day.
That's a good place to stop. You're fighting for that melody every day.
Yeah,
I totally agree with you.
And that's what you live for, isn't it?
Absolutely. Anyway, Steve, that's brilliant. So send me some stuff. We'll put on the show notes.
Yeah, definitely. That'd be great. Thank you so much, dude.
It's great. Good to speak to you. And,
yeah, it's good to speak to you. I love where the hair's going. You really
come on.
Wear it well. It's weird. It's like even me, if I let it grow, it's curly, and but then it gets to a point where you're like, anyway, you just started. But then after a while, you're like, this is really annoying me. You just go off.
Well, it does annoy me, but the thing is, it's taking so long to grow it. I might as well keep it now. So
it's weird. Yeah, I mean, like the beard thing. It's like, if you're letting your hair grow, there comes a point where it's like, this looks absolutely awful.
Oh yes.
And it's like the beard is the itchiness, and then it's like, no, I'm going to let it grow because I kind of want that Viking manly look. And then after a little while, the wife goes, stop kissing me because it's sticking in my eye. And I'm like, oh, sorry. And she's like, shave it off. And then I do shave it off. And then unfortunately, I look like Paddy out of Emmerdale. So I'm like,
well, there we go.
The reason why I've got it is to hide these 3 chins, what I've got. It's not a fashion statement. But anyway,
mate.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for your time. And it's great. Cheers, mate.
So big thanks to Steve. Again, all the information is on the show notes. You can check out his work. And also there's stuff about Patreon and Blues Camp and Icaro Music. So until next time, see you then.